We're starting. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, Vincent, I asked you here today because I want to talk about failure. And I think between the two of us, there's enough failure to go around. But I think that both of us have gotten used to turning failure into success in some ways, or turning it into learning experiences and using it to kind of propel ourselves forward or to find something better than what we would have found otherwise. So, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I like to think that's the case. And at the same time, I guess, failures or learning from failures that is the only way to grow, I guess, in life, right? So we're probably all doing it, but some feel more like failures than others throughout their life.
Okay, that's it. We're done. Finished. No. But so when I met you, you told me about a book that you were writing. What was it called?
When I met you, was I writing a book?
You said there was something about there's some book you never finished, or like how to not finish a book or something. Didn't you have that? No?
I probably talked about a project called How to Not Make a Movie.
How to Not Make a Movie. That's it. Yeah.
Right, because back then I was still focusing on on filmmaking. And actually, before we talked today, I reopened Skype again for the first time in 2 years. I went through the chat history. I scanned through the chat history, and I saw literally calls that I had 5, 6, 7 years ago. And it reminded me of my filmmaking failures because it was calls with people with whom I was making movies back then. And all those projects kind of failed or were ended prematurely, or before the actual finished project. Or so yeah, that was a nice confrontation with failure from the past. And talking about how to not make a movie, that probably took place after I quit one of those projects, or decided to pause it, or actually end it, So I had so much experience in not finishing film projects, or especially feature film projects, because I finished a lot of short films. That I thought, why not write a book about it and call it How to Not Make a Movie? And I actually wrote a couple of blog posts about that in probably my early days on then Steemit.
That's how I got into you, man. I like those posts. They were good.
Right. So, and I guess back then I wrote them to maybe get back into filmmaking, but eventually I kind of made the shift to focusing more on writing, and then instead of just blogging, trying to finish a book or publish a book for a change.
You finished though, didn't you?
More or less. Yeah. I finished the first print, the first 10 physical copies, and now I'm trying to finish the second edition, and I'm kind of failing at finishing that, but I will do it anyway.
At least you got the first edition out though, right?
Right. Yeah.
Do you want to give it a promo now? Should we mention it now or not yet? No, what's it called?
Yeah, why not? It's called. It's actually next to me.
Show it.
Actually, my phone is literally on top of it. It's called The Life of Hypersensitivosaurus. 22 short stories about dinos and other animals. Let me see if we can show it. I cannot see myself right now. Anyhow, shameless plug. Could you see it?
Yeah,
because I couldn't see it.
A little bit. What's it about though?
So it's 22 short stories about all kind of animals that are connected to a character called Hypersensitivosaurus, and Hypersensitivosaurus was a character from my first serious book attempt in November 2019. And then I wrote 50,000 words so that's almost 2.5 years ago. I wrote 50,000 words for National Novel Writing Month. And for the very first time, like in 1 month. And that almost led to a book. And it was called The Life of Hypersensitivosaurus. It was actually a book about a writer struggling with finishing a book or writing his first book. And the book was about a dinosaur, and the dinosaur in his book was called Hypersensitivosaurus. And later that character was kind of taken out of that book, and I started writing short stories about it and other animals. And after like 2 years and different book ideas, it turned into this thing that I started creating this January. So like 2 years and 2 months later.
So in order to stop failing, you had to write in order to stop not getting. Oh God, my brain is not working well today.
I think what you're trying to say is or maybe not, is I always kind of change projects around or change them into another project to maybe actually finish something or give myself the idea that I'm.
In order to actually stop not finishing something, you had to write a book about not finishing something that was actually a book about someone who failed to write a book about not finishing something, right?
And now you actually make me realize that back in 2010-11, when I seriously started filmmaking after like a long hiatus, and 3 years after graduating, like from university studying film or theater, film and television. I literally quit a job. I was fired at another part-time job. This was in 2010 at Christmas or just before Christmas, and I was unemployed. I had hardly any money. I was living at my parents', I think, at that time. Again, I felt pretty much like a loser.
That's why we're here today, to talk about this. Because we're both total losers that are happy with their lives.
So yeah, and then I kind of decided, okay, let's just do what I have wanted to do for such a long time, but I kept postponing it. Let's make movies again. And I literally hadn't made anything in 5 years or so, I guess, due to trying to finish university and failing at that too, but eventually making it years later. And probably also depression and, so in 2010, I decided to really go for that film project. And that's actually what I later wrote those posts about, called How to Not Make a Movie. Or that's how it started. So that first How to Not Make a Movie was a short film about a guy trying to, and now I realize it, trying to finish his first book.
Is it about a guy that failed to write about a book about failing to write about a book?
It was probably based on me trying to finish like my university thesis years ago, or maybe earlier attempts to finish a book. But it was probably about it. Yeah, let's say that my work was a lot about me, so dealing with certain emotions or whatever, or what people expected of me. So this film about a guy trying to finish a book and going to the sea, like daily, and living in some kind of small cabin, probably near the sea, and bringing his typewriter along and putting his typewriter in all kind of different places, and eventually not being able to reach his typewriter. Have you ever seen this short film, actually?
I saw something, but it was really short.
Because there's literally a scene where the typewriter is like on a huge chair on the beach, like meters high, and he can't reach it.
I saw two things. One was like a tiny clip. It was like less than 2 minutes. I guess both were short. And then the other one was on the Canary Islands.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a totally different project. But long story short, you could say that as with my first serious short film attempt in years in 2010, and the same with my like attempt to finish a book in November 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Both times I had to go for like somebody struggling with trying to write a book and finish it to actually get to write, I guess. And maybe I did it because it's a theme that I can easily, relate to, and maybe other people too, or I don't know. Yeah. I'm not even sure what I want to say, but it's only now that I realized that literally that short film, like switch in my career or whatever you want to call it, like seriously going for short films in 2010, and then 9 years later, when I was already living in Portugal. So after moving from the Netherlands to Portugal, trying to finish my first book, like seriously, like almost a decade later, I chose the same theme, but I didn't realize that until now.
It sounds like you were on the toilet for a really long time, and then finally you could take a shit. Sorry. No, but art is like that, right? Art is like kind of like a purge of something sometimes. It's like these emotions that get stuck, clogged up in you, and then you have to let them out somehow. At least I feel like that sometimes. I think a lot of people feel like that.
Yeah, definitely. So that number two is a nice metaphor. But I also realized now that another thing is probably perfectionism, and I'm sure we spoke about this before. Like for many years, I was looking for the perfect story to tell, Also before I started making that film in 2010. And I wrote so many screenplays, or usually parts of screenplays or ideas or whatever, or little stories, and they were all not good enough. And then I end up, when I finally make the move, I end up actually making a film about a cliche in a way, right? Somebody trying to finish a book or write a book. So kind of giving up on that perfect idea and just doing it, and then choosing something that's like close to me. And maybe I did the same in 2019, when I started writing the book about Hypersensitivosaurus. Like, let's write about the struggling writer, because that's what I am.
Uh-huh.
And I have a month, right? And I also decided, like, days before November, at the start of National Novel Writing Month, to take part in this.
But so that went in a different direction, and I want to ask you about that in a second. But like first, I wanted to find out like why did you get into filmmaking in the first place?
Good question. I think I always, like, since I was a little kid, and since I could write and draw, I was writing and drawing. And I wrote like little stories, and I made drawings like next to the stories, or I had these little books with drawings and stories. And so I actually made little books when I was a kid, but I guess at a certain point in time, probably due to not being able to watch a lot of movies as a kid, because we had like cable television when I was 12 years old, in the mid 90s. And I had a strict mother. And there literally was like little on the television, like we had like three channels, like the Netherlands 1, 2, and 3, like public television. So at a certain point in time, when we finally got like our own television in the attic, like my sisters and I, we started watching, more movies. And then I was probably just like early high school years. And I got like really fascinated by movies. And so when I went to university, because my parents expected me to go there because I was like a good student back then, kind of, or high, or my level was high enough to go to university, to put it like that. And I thought of all kind of things to study, like from economy to like geography to history, languages. I couldn't really make a choice. That's another story of my life. So eventually my mother Sorry?
I feel like that's a lot of people though, but like most people really, they just pick one and just stick with it, even though they're not sure about it. They don't feel confident about it, but they just feel like, I got to choose something, right?
Yeah, definitely. Looking back on it, I was probably too young to make that choice, and I should
Me
maybe have
too.
taken a gap year or whatever. But it was expected of me, and I back then I still did what was expected of me.
Yeah. Well, I don't
So
just think it's too young. It's also like we don't have any chances to go out and explore the world, right? So like,
yeah,
if you had those years in high school where you were going out and like seeing things, I think it's not necessarily an age problem as much as it is an experience problem. But
definitely. But it's also I agree. But it's also like the pressure of the generations before us or expectations of and whatever, trying to fit in, maybe even trying to not be a failure. But anyhow, long story short, eventually it was literally my mother who found like this article in the newspaper that talked about these studies, theater, film, and television theory, whatever. And she
yeah.
said, "Oh, maybe this is something for you." And I literally started studying what she picked,
Wow.
and it was probably like the most creative thing that I could pick in university back then. And I'm talking about the year 2000. Wow, ages ago, more than half a lifetime. Um, but so I studied film, and the subjects I liked most were like film history and film analysis, I think. And of course, watching a lot of movies, because we literally had to watch a lot of movies, even in cinema. So after graduating from university, although I actually wasn't educated to make movies. That's the whole.
What do you mean?
I don't know. Another failure, I guess. I studied film in university. I didn't learn to make movies, So
It's like a different kind of major.
it's theory mainly. That's the
Film
whole
and
thing.
filmmaking.
I
What?
had like literally filmmaking was literally like one class out of the whatever 50 classes that I had, in those 7 years eventually.
It's
And
crazy. They got all these little like traps in university where it's like you feel like you should do what you like and what you love, but then meanwhile you know that you're supposed to find a job at the end, right? But you don't know what any of those jobs are actually
yeah,
like. And then it's like it's a mind fuck, man. This whole like
yeah, exactly. And I think they probably warned us at the start that there weren't a lot of jobs, but of course they at the same time they are not really saying that, right?
yeah.
Because they
But
want their students, because students
also a
pay
lot of
money.
people don't do what they study too, right? They study something and
Right.
they end up doing something totally different too. So
Yeah, exactly. And that almost happened to me, after I finally graduated in 2007, like 7 years later. Uh, I I had like a lot of different jobs, and most of them had nothing to do with film. Um, or if they did indeed have to do anything with film, they were like voluntary, so they didn't pay the bills, and it just depressed me, and I probably started like feeling depressed midway through university, especially when I had to start working on my final thesis, which lasted 3 years. But eventually, like 3 years after graduating, and by then I had actually also spent 5 months in Spain um, in 2009 and 2 months in Spain in 2007, just after graduation, where I also actually tried to make movies. Now I realized that I wrote like screenplays there too, and almost started a film project about zombie alcoholics, or actually a guy who almost kills his own father because he's so obsessed by zombies, and his father seems to be a zombie attacking the house, but is just a drunk climbing the stairs and
don't
blah blah blah.
don't
And
tell us. You should still make this someday. This sounds good.
I probably lost the screenplay, but it was interesting. I also wrote a chupacabra story, like about this Mexican legend, and I sent it to some kind of film contest. So now I think of it, I actually was writing screenplays like all the time throughout university, and after graduating university. But all these movies were not made, and it was only in 2010, so 3 years after graduating and after having lived in Spain, for almost half a year and trying to escape the Netherlands and the system, and for the very first time. It was only in 2010 that I decided to, okay, if I really want to make a movie, I have to make it myself, Mm-hmm. And I put this ad somewhere like that I had all the ideas, but I didn't have the equipment, and I was looking for somebody who maybe had the equipment but not the ideas. And then I met this guy called Fuji, like the name of a camera, who lived in Amsterdam, and he became my cinematographer, editor, or cameraman, editor, and we worked together for 3 years on first at one short film about the guy trying to write a book, and then like maybe 10 short films in 2012.
So you did make you finished some films.
Yeah, I did, but yeah, actually that was quite a good year, 2012. I wanted to prove that I could. I actually finished that first film also about the guy writing the book, but yeah, it was just a first, short film, or actually my second.
What was the problem? Like what? Why was it so hard to finish stuff?
Yeah, to go back to what I said about going through my Skype chat history and being reminded of unfinished projects or failures, film projects. Those were all attempts to make a feature-length movie, like a film from over an hour, right? And those projects eventually all failed.
Yeah.
Because it's like way harder. And I literally tried that for like, let me see, from maybe late 2013 up till mid 2017. I tried to make, so in 3.5 years, I tried to make, or maybe a little over 3 years, I tried to make a feature-length movie 3 times. And all 3 of those projects were never finished.
Why did you try to make something shorter though?
Because I was tired of making short films, and I kind of felt like, if I want to really be a filmmaker, I need to prove it by making like a feature-length movie. Also because that's kind of the stuff that you maybe send to a film festival or whatever. And back then I was probably still thinking that I maybe wanted to win prizes and blah blah blah. Let's not even talk about the Academy Awards.
I mean, I think right there, like you kind of like touching on the reason why we both have failed a lot is because I think we grew up with a lot of ideas about what things are supposed to, like, we try to step out of what everyone's supposed to do. But then once you step out of what everyone's supposed to do, there's all these things you're supposed to do if you're not doing what other people are supposed to do too. So, and I think that both of our personalities are kind of like, we're kind of explorers and like, I don't know, like, I don't want to say hypersensitive people like your book, but yeah, I think like we're trying to like connect with things at a very like raw level, and I think when you do that, it doesn't fit into a lot of the molds. It never fits into a mold, so like you there's probably a lot of people that try to write a book about not being able to write a book, but I think in the end, like, you could do it more original than most people, I think, probably, because you come at things from a really kind of raw and direct kind of very human, very, very real perspective, I think. I don't know. My brain's not working now. But
I get what you're trying to say. I think one thing for me, and it's probably the case for you too, whenever I'm working on some kind of project, I want to enjoy it as much as possible.
Yeah.
And I was literally like at the last feature film project that I was working on in 2016-17 on the Canary Islands. After like literally quitting my last job as a teacher in higher education. and leaving the Netherlands and literally taking a backpack with a screenplay, like 90 pages or so in it, and clothes mainly, and maybe a phone and a wallet, whatever. And the idea, like the plan to make a movie there, but having to start from scratch more or less, except for having that screenplay on me. Mm-hmm. And that screenplay, I made that in it was a collaboration with a guy from the United States who I never met, and we met online via Twitter. But we wrote the screenplay together, literally via Skype, more or less, like talking a lot. Cool. And talking it all through. So what I'm trying to say here is, I could make this a very long story because this was like how to not make a movie example. But now I almost forget what I was saying.
That's kind of some forefront shit, though. I think like that's really outside the box, actually, because nowadays maybe that doesn't sound that weird, but like, when was that?
So this was like late 2016, so a little over 5 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know how many people were collaborating online with strangers to make movies then.
Okay. Yeah, we started in 2013, he and I. So back then I was actually pretty active on Twitter.
Yeah.
And
did you know anyone that was doing that though? Like collaborating with a stranger?
No, I think of it, probably not. It was we were an exception.
That's what I'm saying.
And we never met up, we never met up, even though we collaborated for like 5 years, long distance. And now I think of it, probably one of the reasons why most of our projects failed was because we didn't meet up, and at the same time, it didn't stop us from trying, because you can also not make anything because you can't find the right people in real life. And I tried that a lot too, So what I was trying to say with this whole story is, at the end of our last project together, like a Spanish feature film titled Los Ojos Rojos, The Red Eyes, kind of a zombie movie, but like totally atypical zombie movie in the time that zombie movies were still cool. At the end of the project, when the end was nearing, when I had already returned to the Netherlands because I ran out of money, and the main actress had to go back to Madrid where she lived. Her family lived on the Canary Islands, and the camera guy dropped out of the project, and my backup camera guy never showed up. That guy was actually the friend with whom I made like that first short film about the writer. So it kind of fell apart, and near the end of the project, and now I think of it near the end of the next project that we made when I was already in Portugal and still with that guy in the United States. We kept repeating like this mantra: we shouldn't forget to enjoy the process. But we forgot anyway, or I mainly started enjoying it less and less. And I think I'm the kind of person who actually needs like people to be present, like physically, preferably. Otherwise, I lose energy like a lot. And actually, video call already makes a difference, over like, for instance, text chat.
Yeah.
So it just drained me, all these calls over Skype, or okay, we saw each other, but there was a lot of distance all the time, and I felt I had to do all the work because I was the filmmaker. He was mainly the producer / screenwriter. So all those years, So I guess the whole point I want to make here about like the creative process and how you and I like are pretty much the same is I guess I usually reach a point where the energy and the fun just oozes out of a project, and I mainly feel like what's the word, like closing the book and moving on to something else. And
I think something that's true for both of us. I feel like a need for feedback. If I don't get feedback, I get really bored.
Right.
Because and the reason why I think that is like a lot of people are looking for approval, and I don't feel that I'm not looking for approval. I appreciate approval, but like the creative process in itself is fun enough for me, right? But then we're also supposed to we're supposed to figure out how to feed ourselves and everything, right? And we have to, right? So in order to figure out how this is going to put food on the table, or how this is going to lead to some kind of
Right.
like a better life, it's like, oh, I gotta get feedback on this because I don't know if this is gonna work, right? And then like, how do you say, like, we get stuck on that because actually we're having fun just doing it, or we should be able to have fun just doing it. And I feel like a lot of like in the industry, like people that, and not everyone, but there are definitely people that like they're trying to become well known. They're too stuck on that, trying to become well known, and that's why a lot of stuff is boring. Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
then
yeah, definitely.
on the other hand, if we don't get feedback, we're just like, I could just do this in my head and enjoy it.
Yeah, I get your point. And
Yeah.
at the same time, now I think of it, back in those years, I didn't have feedback. I spoke about my projects with family and friends a little bit, um, but it wasn't like I wrote blog posts about it, like I've been doing the last couple of years, and getting like encouraging comments or whatever. Then again, what has usually been my issue with, especially with my film projects, is like literally, and I hate to say it, like lack of budget and not wanting to go the way of like what's the word, like trying to get money, and then playing by the rules of somebody who gives me the money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like, it makes it really hard for people, like there are a lot of people that you kind of get these two camps: the people that go in for, they just deal with that, they deal with people telling them to do it this way and that way, and then there's other people that say, I'll never do that. And it's a much harder kind of road to take. It's a much more challenging road. If you come out the other side, it's a lot more rewarding probably, but
Yeah,
it can definitely take a toll. But you know
and you probably, I know you know all about like trying to kind of energize a group of people to get something off the ground.
for sure.
And I did that many times, like as a film director. So I tried to add all these people to the team to work on what was originally my project.
Yeah.
And then you kind of try to how to put it. You have a certain. It's very difficult to get that same kind of energy, like or the way you feel about a project, like um,
Well, in the
is not
business world.
necessarily how the other people who work on your project feel about it, right? So they preferably want to either get paid,
Yeah.
or they don't want to spend a lot of time on it, or um, or they lose interest when you're moving too slow or whatever. And so usually at the start I was always like full of energy when I started the project, and then I reached a point where I maybe get too much into my head and I start worrying about things, and it's hard to still act like um, like all is well, and slowly people start wondering if you can actually finish that project, I guess. But it's different, and then you probably start doubting yourself, and that's different on a film project, especially when it becomes like a bigger project than it is on writing a book by yourself.
Mhm.
um, but I guess I've always been trying to find this kind of balance between doing things by myself, and I'm sure you can relate to this, and working with others.
Well, that's what
And
I
I've
wanted
never
to.
really found the right balance.
I really want to talk about that now because I feel like that's part of where my failure. That's where almost all my failure came in. It's because I was trying to find people that could collaborate with me on things that were my vision, but I didn't have the money. and I didn't have the focus. So it's like you need one or the other. You need to have the money to pay them, or you need to have the
Right.
focus that
Definitely.
can really inspire them. And I think like it's kind of an escape that a lot of artists go to when they feel like they don't necessarily know exactly what they want to do, and they don't feel confident enough yet. It's like they try and rely on um, other people's skills. So like I'll just talk about my failure a lot, so we don't think you're the only failure here. Like I've been talking about putting out this album for maybe 12 years now, probably. Yeah, yeah, at least 10 years. So, and then I was talking about putting out a book for maybe 8 years. I finally put out some novellas and stuff like that. But so the album, the reason why it took so long to make is because I could only play guitar and sing. I was writing these songs, and I didn't even know what I was doing. Like I picked up the guitar, like my natural artist instinct was to just pick up the guitar, right? And I should just follow that. But then you get all this other stuff coming in telling you like, oh, you should do this and you should do that. And you look at other people and they look so cool at what they're doing, and it's all together, and they look like you feel jealous of what they're making, and you get confused, you know. But really the drive to just make something, like that's what leads to cool stuff when you're doing it as a kind of I don't want to say like a real artist, because there are real artists that work in industries too, but as a independent, I would say an independent artist. um and I just kept getting lost on that, where I thought, if only I find the right producer, if only I find the right drummer,
Right.
if only I find, like, I need friends who can do this for me. Like I need to find
Mhm.
someone who's going to play the right accordion. And it's like, oh, that accordion's not good, and oh, that's not good. And it's like, you know, if you're on an island and you only have a couple items, you got to make what you have. You know, you got to make a house from sticks or whatever. Like, so I think for artists it's the same. If you're really inspired to do something, you're gonna just put together what you have. And I think that when you have too much insecurity, it's really hard to
Yeah.
do that. So you got to get rid of all the insecurity first and just say, whatever, I'm this person, I'm in this situation right now, and I'm just gonna make what I can make. And it took me a really long time to say that. I
Yeah.
kept having perfectionism, right? You have this idea of perfect. And as soon as I gave up on that, that's when I put out my first novella. And that's when I didn't finish the album, but I put up all the demos for people to hear. And, you know, is it ideal? No. But who cares? You know, some people feel it. Some people, they listen to it and they're like, I like what you're about and I want to know more. And tell me when you put out something else, because I'm curious. So
Yeah.
what's the problem? I'm not famous, but, you know, that's not something that like, it's not necessary, first of all. And
Yeah.
it can also come at any time. It's not something that like you just slowly work up towards it. Like it hits, there's just a point somewhere where something switches, so where
We
people finally get
right.
what you're doing.
We all have a different creative process, right? And but I guess you and I are also pretty much alike in that we are interested in like different media.
Yeah,
So not just a writer, for instance.
yeah.
Um, and now I think of it, like literally, there were also other reasons why I did not finish like film projects, and one of them was literally the format of the film. So
Mm-hmm.
let's try this kind of web series that we put on YouTube when YouTube was still cool. Um, so, and in the end, you start thinking, kind of like you say, about we should reach an audience, blah blah blah, and then you're gonna spend a lot of time in trying to find an audience, and then you kind of spend less time on the project. And
Fuck, man, that happened today.
exactly, so
Yeah.
so then it ends up like being a web series of no idea, like eight 4 minute films or whatever, that I had almost forgotten about already.
Mm.
Um, but there's always so many factors, and like you said, another thing is like comparing yourself to others,
Mhm.
which is really not helpful, especially if you're like, I guess, like a lot of creatives. If you have like the perfectionist inside of you, or if you are like very sensitive or more sensitive than the average person, um, But I guess, and that's maybe one thing we could talk about, like, is that switch from seeing something as a failure to maybe actually seeing it as like a strength.
Yeah.
Or like how you can turn a failure into a strength. Like, so like literally the end of that film project that I made on the Canary Islands. Like, so that was around the summer of 2017. And then I was already back in the Netherlands for a couple of months, and I still tried to make that project work. So we had literally like filmed for 1 weekend on the Canary Islands. And the idea was to make a film of maybe, don't even remember whether, I think we were going to try to make it a feature-length movie, but it might have ended up being 50 minutes. And I needed like 3 weekends to film it. And in the end, I filmed for 1 weekend. And after that 1 weekend, the camera guy became like unavailable. And I literally didn't get in touch with him. Then I tried to arrange that backup camera, this friend from the Netherlands, who told me 3 times that he would come over. The third time, like 2 days before we wanted to continue filming, he like sent me a message that he was at the train station and he didn't have money to go to the airport that day. So he was gonna fly over that day. Even though I had offered him like to send him money a couple of times, and he said, yeah, I will probably have money on Thursday, whatever. Anyhow. So in the end, that project fell apart, and if I would have had 2 more weekends, I could have had enough footage to probably edit it into a feature film. But in the end, we literally only had enough footage for a trailer. So we made like a trailer, and the idea was to crowdfund it. So around the time that I almost gave up, like July 2017, I had like all these talks with this guy in the United States that I was working with, right? And he wanted to continue the project, but I just couldn't explain to him, I guess, how much of an effort it had been for me, like all the time. And even though he was helping a lot, he was never there, you know? He was in the United States. I was on the island making the movie, you know? So then I reached the point where we had like this one call, and I actually blogged about this, and you might have read that. That was like my very early Steemit blogging days, like June 2017 maybe, or July. I wrote about this one last call I had with this guy, or like the last call of that project, where he said something at a certain point in time, like, he tried to tell me like sometimes you need to go through the pain, and you know, it's all part of the process, and you need to lean into despair. Despair.
Okay.
And I was tired of that talk. I couldn't handle it anymore. It was too much. I had suffered enough. So we decided to quit the project, or I decided to quit the project. I just didn't see it work anymore. Even though we had decided just before to maybe just go to the island with a group of people for a week and make it into a camping trip, and during that trip film a movie, which sounded kind of cool, you know. So we quit the project, and then I felt very relieved in a way, you know, like was often the case when I quit something that was like just a weight on my shoulder, had become a weight on my shoulder. But I also felt kind of disappointed in myself, you know, probably like a failure, like a loser, whatever. And then you try to steer that into something positive. So I remember being on a phone call with my parents and telling them that I had quit yet another project, right? Which kind of felt like telling them that I dropped out of university or whatever, even though I never did, you know, I finished university. And I think my father said something, or my mother said something like, when are you ever going to finish something? And that felt like, that hurt, you know?
Harsh.
Like as if I hadn't finished something, but they knew how important this was for me, and they expected me to finish it or whatever. So that's exactly what you don't want to hear. And I tried to kind of turn that into something positive, and I wrote a blog post about it where I first said, I talked about the power of quitting. And now I realized that I probably mix up those two things that were around at the same time. And the other was about this filmmaker friend saying something to me like, maybe you're just not cut out to be a filmmaker or something like that, which also hurt. And at the
do you
same
feel
time,
like that
when
though?
something hurts, there's probably some truth in it, right? That you don't want to admit.
Do you feel like that's true now, though, or do you just feel like it's not the right time, or maybe it's something you want to do?
By now, I believe more and more in something, in it not being the right time or circumstances, and I still see myself probably finish a feature film in the future. But what I've learned from all these kind of experiences, like how to not make a movie, how to not write a book, whatever, is exactly that. So I feel I need all these kind of failures to find out how I should not do something, or with whom I should not work, or what kind of format, or what kind of amount of people. So I literally feel like if it's going to happen, it's going to be the ideal circumstances. It's going to be as fun as possible, as little time as possible. Like, for instance, one weekend with a group of friends in a cool location with some cameras, sound, like creative people, just wanting to have fun, no pressure, not aiming for Academy Awards, whatever, just winging it and doing some kind of preparation that doesn't need to, I don't know, take up a lot of time, but makes the improv easier. Because that's another thing.
Stuff that can win an award, though. Like that, like people imagine that how many movies or albums, they just came out of someone's ass, like at the right place in the right time. It's like someone wrote it in the bathroom. There's a lot of amazing stuff that comes out like that. I mean, like, I played a lot of shows, and not a ton, but enough. And the best ones were the ones where I just had no expectations whatsoever. I thought, like, nobody's coming to this. There was a show where, like, I played shows in front of like 40, 50, 100 people, and it was just like I was trying to be something. And then there was another show very soon after that where I played in front of about 3 people, and I was just feeling like, oh, nobody came. And then, like, 2 of the people in the audience cried. And I was like, wow, this is better than that whole crowd just kind of politely clapping. Like, that's the really amazing stuff. It happens when you're not trying too hard, when you're just kind of enjoying the process, or I don't know.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's probably one of the reasons why I did not finish a lot of things. Is that I made things way bigger than necessary, and I still have that tendency. Like, even with right now with finishing the second edition of my book. Why did I even talk about the second edition? Because the perfectionist in me was not happy enough with the first version. But then, instead of just changing the layout and taking out some typos, my family helped me with that, because we are all, sorry to say so, grammar Nazis. So instead of just doing that, making some small changes to it and then just clicking print, I'm making it way bigger in my head, and I'm postponing it, and it feels like I'm writing a new book now instead of finishing like the second edition.
Really?
Now I'm or I make it look like that inside of my head, like the resistance, or whatever you want to call it, like the voice in your head that you should not listen to, that tells you not to do things that actually make you feel good. It's kind of trying to talk me out of finishing this right now. And I'm actually close to writing a post, like the last couple of days, almost apologizing to people, which I don't want to do and I should not do, or explaining why that second edition still isn't finished, because a lot of people are waiting for my book. And
fuck you,
but I also know.
Out.
Sorry?
No, I said fuck you. It comes out when it comes out.
Yeah, no, it comes out in April. But what I'm trying to say here is that that we always, in deep into a project, it's sometimes very hard to zoom out and see it like in the way it really is, or you they usually don't see all the things that you make way bigger than they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and at the same time, I sometimes think like maybe in a way I like the creative process just much more than the actual product phase, or like the alone like the post-production phase. So I usually kind of prefer to quit a project before like the post-production. It's like experimentation, right? So there's something inside of me that kind of sabotages my own project, and I guess, but the positive thing is, and I know you are like that too. I always find another project,